So, welcome everybody to the second half of today. We will start the day with the plenary session. The plenary session will first have two plenary talks. The first one by David Lecoq from the Alliance for Rural Electrification, and the second one by Romain Gelé from NG Laborelec. So following these two panel talks, we will have then an OEM panel discussion, and that one is focused on soft wing systems, soft and hybrid wing systems. And as part of the OEM panel discussion, we also have pitch presentations of the companies, something like 1 to max 3 slides, just to introduce the companies. So I would then first like to welcome our first speaker, David, please. I will pull up your slides. Go ahead.
In my best Spanish, I will say buenas tardes, I think, at this point of the day. Good afternoon. My name is David Lecoq, and I'm with the Alliance for Rural Electrification. Well, I'm very happy to be here, a little bit, overwhelmed by all the technical acumen in this room as a non-technical person myself, but I feel like I'm back in school, so to say. So this is probably a good thing. Well, welcome to this afternoon. I hope that the coffee will repower you for the rest of the day. And because I'm going to try and warm you up to the subject of airborne wind in the context of rural electrification. Rural electrification meaning in emerging markets. So the way that we can structure it briefly is, what on earth is Alliance for Electrification? Second, airborne wind market characteristics in our sector, and then a bit on the world of funding. My goal here today is hopefully not chat for 20 minutes, but half that, and to get some feedback and to get especially your brain juices flowing, so to say, because we are coming from, we're presenting markets outside of the European Union, outside of the US and developed markets, and so into a new use case. So ARE, we are the global business association based in Belgium for distributed renewable energy that is focusing exclusively on emerging markets. And the point is to deliver or help private sector deliver 500 million electricity connections between now and 2030. And in so doing, create green jobs and help address climate change. Only this. Our members, we have around 200 companies and stakeholders, one of them being Airborne Wind Europe. Big thank you for the invitation here today, of course. And then companies such as SkySails and Enerkite as well. So you see here, the idea is that we federate all the green technologies from standalone to mini-grid, even bigger perhaps. And so all these technologies together present the ARE family as the energy access delivery service, like the Uber Eats for SDG 7, if you wish. Some of our members you can see here on the slide. I did double check that the three I just mentioned are represented in case the representatives are looking for it. And so we are working in more than 55 countries. What do we do with these organizations and in general is that we want to foster the market. So create the market or jumpstart or enlarge the market for electrification and therefore for airborne wind. To put money into this market because it's completely different from, say, typical European Union market. Innovation, I think, well, being at this conference, I think we can tick that box for sure. And then fourth is embedding sustainability, so life cycle thinking. We have different services we do that for. So in airborne wind, you see that, and we've learned yesterday during the reception, for those that, like myself, came a little bit later this morning because of headaches after receptions, and then this morning that there is now this validation of the power curve, that there is a growing competitiveness with other sources of fuel, because again, the markets where we are looking at, your competition is not going to be the grid, because there will not be a grid in most cases. It will be diesel generators. And so that's really what you look at. We see the evolutions that are happening in different European member states and in different African markets. Doing some brainstorming and speaking with a lot of you in this conference so far, we know that with airborne wind being a newer kid on the block in our part of the world, is the cost competitiveness versus diesel, especially then larger scale diesel installations, is very interesting. Your uptake being 24 hours or available, possible to have 24 hours means that the most important cost of a typical electrification project, meaning storage batteries, is significantly reduced. And then very importantly, it's also scalable. Because again, where we are working now, you have to imagine it will be rural communities, villages that have not had electricity throughout history, where it also means it's very difficult to estimate demand. You can do it today with some site surveys, but estimate demand in 5 years, how is going to be the development of the community, the region in 5 years, quite challenging. So therefore, if you have a scalable and cost-competitive solution, I think that is a very strong argument I would put forward in your marketing brochures. And then last but not least, it is complementary to the renewable energy sources that are already more prevalent in this market. So traditional, if I can say, wind turbines with solar and so on, because not only the companies, but also the users, in this case governments, funders, like to see systems that have no fossil fuel, so no diesel backup either, that means in our case. And to be able to do that in a cost-competitive way, it's, well, either you find a good but hopefully cheap battery supplier, or you have a mix of different compatible technologies such as airborne wind. A few of the points that we see that are going to be useful to look into when you want to develop projects in those markets are, well, you will need, of course, the political support. This is the case in the European Union, all the more so in emerging markets. And then, well, like for all renewables, the question of logistics, how do you bring things to site? The question of site specification, so the identification of where you're going to have these systems. Are you going to have a good wind resource? Are going to be very important. And then last but not least, this is a subject I think we can brainstorm on together, is what is going to be the business model, right? Because here in more mature market, typically you will look at feed-in tariffs, certificates programs, and feed into the grid, and that's it. This is a different scenario in our context, where you look more at a combination of private equity meets subsidy schemes. So we'll come back on that in a moment. And so I think that is something where there is a lot of, how to say, creativity that can be brought into the market. In terms of potential markets, these two, three that are mentioned there, they're coming from some of our companies in the space. So we know in the Philippines there is an openness. We know in Mauritius. But actually, I would say, generally in emerging markets, and particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, there is a very big openness to new technologies, because there is a very big need to provide energy access. And therefore, any market with a good wind resource, I think, should be of interest to you. A few context challenges that you can keep in mind when looking at this market. Actually, let me pause here. Who has ever worked or looked at markets outside of the developed world, quote unquote? Yeah. I would say that's a solid 5%, 8%, you see? So that's what I'm trying to, warm you up for, is via AWEs to come to the other parts of the world. Because you clearly see from the numbers behind me that, well, nearly half the population has no power. It's quite simple. You need 90 million connections a year. Currently, at best, we have 30 million. And then it needs significantly more money to come into the space. The good thing is, as I say, your competition is not really there. It's only diesel generators or candles, because grid will never come to most of these areas. Very simple, because of the population sparsity. If you have countries, to take an Asian example, in Kazakhstan, it's I think 6 people per square kilometer average. So if you know that in my country, Belgium, it's €1 million per kilometer of transmission line, that's a lot of money for very few connections, right? So there is a big market there that is up for grabs. And then there is the estimation from the IEA that has helped us a lot in our lobby work throughout the years, is that depending on which of the IEA reports you prefer, 50 to 70% of those missing connections, as we say, of those 700 million missing connections, will be best served, fastest served, and cheapest served with distributed renewables, including airborne wind energy solutions. This statistic is certainly not lost on cash-strapped governments and investors, and therefore, I think an interesting point to know. In terms of policies, Well, it's a bit similar to what I think you know in the European context. You need targets, you need subsector targets to get those politicians to do something useful. You need to stimulate these ruralification strategies and embed that in a broader policy framework. Now, I realize I'm at a technical conference, so maybe I don't spend too much time about policies, but this is certainly in our markets, and I'm sure you're realizing the European context as well, absolutely instrumental. Here in Europe, we had, priority market access, priority dispatching, that kind of discussion that has made a huge role. It's the same in the context if you are in typical sub-Saharan African market. You need to have the government on board. You need to have that government put in a good business framework and then a good regulation framework. Luckily, advocacy groups exist, so we make nice documents like this one that we give to every government person that we meet that is actually making laws and policies to stimulate mini-grids. So mini-grids, from a technical standpoint, are isolated grids in in ruralification markets. So that it's basically a step-by-step guide how you can stimulate these technology, how the government can stimulate the energy access progress for its own population. So in the world of rural electrification funding, we see that a few of the main funding actors, I alluded to it before, are not the same as what you see more in the more mature markets, because here we are talking about markets with a higher perceived risk. I say perceived. And also you're looking at a customer base which is significantly less wealthy than you will have in a typical mature market. So it means that you're looking at the do-good side of things, so government and subsidies and things like, well, feed-in tariffs, not so much, but similar, let's say, programs. We call them RBF, result-based financing schemes. So there's a lot of financial creativity and engineering going on from the public side. And then next to that, you will, if you can convince, what is it in Spain, BBVA, to come in, great. I have not seen them once in a project yet, but you will have interest from those impact funds, from those VC, PE kind of funds, in other words, financing people that do enjoy a higher risk, but of course want something in return. And so that's a lot of our work with ARE, is to knock coconuts together to see how can we come up with schemes that are attractive for private finance, but also for government. You see, these are people who are not talking to each other usually. And so this is certainly where your experience also from companies on the ground will be very valuable for us to take on, likely probably via AWE, in these markets that we're talking about. We also have, in addition to government programs, in addition to private equity, you see that there's a lot of, I mentioned financial creativity there. Some of our other companies are specialized in some of these things like climate finance, like crowdfunding. I put a few names on that slide so that you have some names to Google, or of course I'm happy to introduce you to that if you are interested in coming to these emerging markets. So I hope I raced a little bit through this presentation, but my point, as I say in the beginning, is to see, okay, how can AWE and how can ARE help airborne wind energy organizations become more prevalent in emerging markets? What do you need to go there? And conversely, what can we bring to you to see, okay, maybe you can just refine a bit or tweak left and right and you have a business case, right? So I don't know if I'm allowed, but I would like to invite for questions. How much time do we have, Roland? 5 minutes, I hope?
Yes, we do have.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So please, if there are questions. No.
There's a gentleman in the back there. Thanks for breaking the ice, sir. Maybe name, organization, and then question.
Hello, thank you. My name is Rishikesh. I'm a PhD researcher in Delft. My question was, so typically what would be a size of a single project in such emerging markets? I would assume it would be varying a lot, but typically what would be a size of one project, maybe in kilowatts or something like that?
Thank you. That's actually straightforward, fair question, and that's not so easy to answer because the way that our sector is set up is it's bottom up. So meaning we look at where is the demand, and then what kind of solutions can come from that. So the demand can be very small, can be solar home system level. Small can be 3 kilowatt, 5 kilowatt, run-of-river systems, for instance. But we have also villages, cities actually, in northeast Congo that are 20,000 people. So I would say if you ask me for a range, I would say somewhere between 40 and 120 kilowatt.
That's good.
Thank you. Are
Good
there
to
more
know.
I'm pleased. Exactly, yeah. I understand there's a lot of 100 kilowatt kind of ranges available present in the room. So this is good. Please, sir.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. A question that I have
What's
is
your name and company?
Eduard IJsselmuiden from Kite Power.
Nice.
In construction companies, there is a goal in the Netherlands to become zero emission at some point.
Mhm.
Is something similar planned for agriculture as well, so that we can get help from the regulations, so to say?
That would be an interesting subject. I'm not aware of any such stringent goal or binding goal for specifically the agri sector. But what it does allow me is to make a bridge to the climate finance discussion and the net zero discussion, because one growing source of funding for our types of projects is companies that are not in the energy business, but in the energy that are consuming a lot of power and that are going to, for their own, whether it's in Netherlands or beyond, their own net zero commitments, going to invest in carbon credits. And so our projects will be eligible, I mean, typically will be eligible for carbon credits, but they will be in practice more the bigger kind of projects, 100 kilowatt and above, because of the cost of certification, right? But so the answer I would have is yes, sorry, no, not in as an industry-wide, but as a level of the individual companies to help meet their net zero, because net zero, it means you still pollute, but you just buy your conscience back. Eh? Yeah. You can quote me on that. Then we are happy to take that investment in the sector. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Maybe one more question, if there is one. Yeah, here in the back.
Yeah, Asger, or wasn't me, from Kite Mill. You said we had to compete against the diesel in this market, and I think competing against diesel is sort of the holy grail, but it differs also a lot from country to country. Some have subsidies and some have not subsidies, some have high taxes like in Norway. So could you say something about the cost of energy in these markets relying mainly on diesel? Yes,
I mean, the cost of diesel, actually the problem is not so much the cost of the diesel itself as the cost of getting the diesel to the site. To give you an illustration, if we are working in, I mentioned the DRC before, in the DRC typical project, when you're constructing, out of all the expenses that you have, 30% goes to logistics, meaning getting stuff on site. So that also has a serious impact on the price of petrol. That you have to bring there, plus some of these consumers. I mean, rural communities typically don't consume that much diesel, so there it's a different discussion. But if you look at industrial, you have certainly mines and that kind of, or telco towers, that's really a lot of diesel, and so their pricing is very high. I know even in the context of Alaska, there is companies that we had that were competing, that was easy for them to compete because the price was $1 per kilowatt hour. Yeah, imagine. So I mean, it's not everywhere like that. It's not that juicy, but it's, you know, competing against 20 cents, 30, 40 cents. Yeah, it's you know, there's more than 50 countries just in Africa, so you need to be a little bit specific. But the fact that once your airborne wind solution is on site, and then after that it's only maintenance, will be a very interesting proposition against having to bring diesel all the time. And then you have the non-financial considerations, which, I mean, this might be a little bit, you know, early on, but I know that some of the big customers of mini-grid systems tend to be, I mean, the most controversial example will probably be the US Army, because every time they can avoid a fuel transport, it's that many IEDs that you avoid. Right. So, and money is not a problem for the Pentagon. So you have what I want to say with that, you have to think a bit what can be the use cases. So here we talk about a lot of emerging markets and then narrow down according to the specifics of of your technology, where you're comfortable, where you have your partners, what could be good markets for you. And there, together with Christian and colleagues, of course, we're happy to guide you, I suppose, into the emerging world.
Thank you. There was one last quick question.
I'll go quick, hopefully. Edward Fagan with Zero Nexus. You mentioned certification, and I just wondered how much a role does that play, along with insurance, in terms of the financing picture for distributed renewables in emerging markets, and if there's examples in solar or distributed or like small-scale wind in those markets already.
That's actually a very important question, and the quality assurance, I would say more broadly, is something that you will need to prove if you want to attract funding from international financiers like the World Bank. So DFIs will have an enormous amount of criteria that they need people to tick. The good thing is once you get through the process, it's a bit arduous in the beginning, but once you get through it, then the follow-on is a lot easier. We work as ARE also with the IEC, for example, and that have special commissions for our markets. They also have an Africa office now in Kenya, I believe. So the whole question of technical standardization and certification is very important. There is a second element that I would add to that. It's something that we as an industry association like to do, is we've come up, for example, with consumer protection principles, right? This means it's a voluntary commitment that we ask our mini-grid companies to sign, those that want to commit to it. And that they say, well, these are the 10 principles that I promise to respect, so to say. And then they sign it up, and that's the kind of thing that has now turned into one of those prerequisites for getting funding from kind of World Banks kind of organizations. So there is a technical certification, but then there is also certification of how you run your business. Are you going to be, because again, you're competing with, I mentioned diesel gensets, but you're also competing with substandard quality products. You know, you have everything. And if you go to the local market, you have very good quality, you have very terrible quality. And so that's the way that you differentiate yourself. Is your product good, and is your business running in a responsible way, I could say. Yeah. Sorry, I give long answer, but I'm very passionate.
That is good. Thank you very much. Again.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.